The Nerdcast Empire is on the air. We are back with another week of podcasting excellence here on the Nerdcast Empire. I am Matt in the studio. Great to have you along with us. Episode 109 of the Nerdcast Empire, episode 38 of Music Weekly. This week we are talking the music of October the 18th. And it was another good week in music. Really good stuff. We'll post the playlist a little bit later on in the program so you can take a look at everything. Really good stuff this week on the Nerdcast Empire, and we've got a lot to talk about, so we'll get right to that. Joining me, as always, in studio is Mike. Mike, how's it going?
It's going. I have made it. I was able to get through the new music and pick a few things, and I've survived the Ohio Retro Gamers Expo.
Yeah, between that and the time change, a lot going on this weekend, and we'll talk more about that gaming expo coming up on Thursday's edition of Anime Thursday, so make sure you join us. Probably be a little late on Thursday, probably looking at 8:30 Eastern for that coming up on Thursday. We'll let you know as we get a little bit closer. Chris joining us in the chat. And of course, Chris also giving a shout out on the Discord.
Yeah.
And the Discord is now at least limitedly open. We're kind of slowly, it's kind of a rollout open, but we'll have a lot of cool stuff in the Discord. It'll be where you'll be able to see about when our streams are coming up, and we'll post a lot of the information in there, a lot of the chats and stuff, and get some ideas for content. We've got some new ideas that we would like to try to do on our network, if you will. That'll be coming up in the days and weeks to come, but really exciting stuff as we just kind of keep chipping away at it a little bit at a time as we build the Nerdcast Empire across all social media. We just got a few news items to talk about today. Nothing too serious this week, but we did want to start off, and as you correctly predicted, I wasn't going to pass up this story from Blabbermouth. It's just almost too obvious because of our podcast, and because this guy has come up on our podcast many times before. It's Jeff Tate, and the former Queensryche singer has revealed that he is working on the third and final chapter in the band's classic Operation Mindcrime album series. So it looks like we may be getting an Operation Mindcrime 3, which is kind of interesting. Jeff Tate's an interesting guy for sure. Obviously, he's off doing his own thing. He's basically performing a lot of the music like the Operation Mindcrime kind of on his own with his own band. What are your general thoughts about maybe a conclusion to the Mindcrime series?
Having read the article and giving it a lot of thought, I'm all for it. During that period of time when Mindcrime 2 came out, not that I didn't enjoy the Queensryche albums at that point in time, but it felt like when he sat down and did Mindcrime 2, it was almost, to some degree, a callback to kind of the older sound. Like, there's a certain guitar tone that Mindcrime kind of lends itself to that he uses, and I think, clearly he loves these characters, so if he's going to go back and revisit them, I get the feeling we're probably going to get some of the best work that we can expect from Jeff Tate in 2024, 2025.
Yeah, you certainly hope so. Chris asking if after a third Mindcrime does it can become a mind felony. Possibly. Not sure, have to check the laws wherever Jeff is calling home these days. But I think
you just can't be outnumbered by the Unforgivens at this point.
That's true. You kind of got to keep going to stay ahead of the Unforgivens. But, we've talked about, because he's coming in concert in early 2025 to Cincinnati, and I think we're going to try to get the chance to go down and see him, because there was obviously this initial, everything that happened with the band and the falling out they had, and then they bring in a new lead singer who sounds like Jeff Tate from 1988.
Yeah. And,
we saw them a couple times, and he is an amazing lead singer, but it's not like Jeff Tate all of a sudden can't sing and is totally, unable to put on a great show. We've seen some videos, especially lately.
Yeah.
Seems like he's doing really well.
I mean, he's collaborated with Avantasia.
Yeah.
Sounded great on that.
And his name's actually going to come up again later on when we get to the Vault, which is probably the most bizarre place we found him this week. But, I think clearly he has a vision for what Queensryche was, and his band that can't be called Queensryche is, and it's clearly, for whatever reason, not what the other original band members want to do at this point, and that's completely fine. I think they can kind of go their separate ways and do their own thing, and it kind of keeps coming back to that comment you made a few weeks ago where you were talking about another situation similar to this about these bands that get back together after all these years. What would be the most surprising one, or what would be the one that would just be like a big deal? And right now, it just feels like the parties here are just so much going in opposite directions that it feels almost impossible at this point that there could be some sort of, at least in the near future, some sort of reconciliation.
Yeah, you kind of feel like both parties can create the music they want to create separate, so why would you put yourself through the potential stress and agony of reconciling? It seems like they're both kind of in good places now. Kind of a similar thing to Skid Row. Like, it's clear that the band members just want no part of working with Sebastian Bach, so as long as everybody's happy, I see no problem with it.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm really interested to see what this album sounds like. It's obviously still in the fairly early stages, so who knows exactly when it might come out.
Yeah.
I would think we're probably at least a year away from even thinking about news on that. I imagine we would start maybe seeing some singles drop before we'd ever get to the point of an album release.
I would guess so. And it's kind of funny reading the article and kind of reading the comments underneath the article is that I think people sometimes take things too seriously. Like, in reference to Mindcrime 2, the article refers to it as being unnecessary and perhaps even cheapening the first one, but was a decent album. It's like, it's just another album. Like, you have to separate yourself from he's telling a story and just say, this is an album written by this guy and this band in this year. It's not setting yourself up to have to match or exceed Mindcrime 1's sound or performance is just not reasonable. And I think going into a Mindcrime 3, if this is creatively what he wants to do, I think you're going to get an inspired effort. You may not like it as much as 1 and maybe not even as much as 2, but I think you're still going to get something that you'll be able to enjoy because he's enjoying making it.
I think if that's the standard you're going to go by, there's a lot of bands who've released a lot of unnecessary albums.
Yeah.
Once they've released their magnum opus, the great album, then everything they released after that was a giant waste of time, according to that logic. Like, what kind of craziness is that? Like, it doesn't make any sense at all.
And honestly, Mindcrime 2, I don't think the songs totally stand up as well as 1, but you have an instance where he gets to do a duet with Ronnie James Dio in Mindcrime 2. That didn't happen in the first one. That was the second one. And the article kind of alludes to and asks him if he has an idea of who he wants to bring in to play the Dr. X character this time around. The first time around, they had a British actor. What was his name?
Anthony Valentine?
Yeah, who's sadly no longer with us. Number 2, he had Ronnie James Dio, who's no longer with us. It'll be interesting to see if he brings in another kind of classic metal vocalist to do some sort of cool duet with this time around.
I mean, I'm not a believer in jinxes. I think I make that very clear on all the broadcasts I work. But if you're that guy that gets that call, you just think, maybe it's time to go make sure my will's in order. Maybe it's
or at the very least, just stay current with your doctor visits. Just don't be surprised by anything.
Right. But yeah, I'm really excited for it. I think, again, any of these classic bands or classic singers that want to create new music similar to the stuff that I liked, I don't see a downside in that. Maybe I won't like it as well. Doesn't mean I'm not going to like it. Like, I just think people need to just be happy that there are people out there willing to create this stuff for us.
Yeah.
And be, pleased with whatever they get. And if you don't like it, you don't have to buy it, because goodness knows there's a million ways to sample music for free now each and every week. Like, what it sounds like before you spend your money on it. But
nothing he does today will make the song Operation Mindcrime or I Don't Believe in Love or Eyes of a Stranger any less amazing. Those are great songs. They'll always be great songs.
For sure. And I look forward, hopefully, to getting a chance to see Jeff Tate sing those songs live coming up in early 2025 down in Cincinnati. But something to keep an eye on. Obviously, probably won't be talking about this again for a while, because I have a feeling we won't hear any more about it for a little bit, but just an interesting possible future release from Jeff Tate and his new band. A couple of bands that obviously or at least one band that is not currently producing any music is Rush. News came out this week that they are going to have a new vinyl box set covering 1989 through 1996. That includes the Atlantic Records era, like Presto, Roll the Bones, Counterparts, and Test for Echo. I believe you've looked up the price tag on that. What do we have for that?
Yeah, I found a website, the Rhino Records website. They have it for pre-order right now for $149.98.
That seems somewhat reasonable, to be honest with you. I mean, you're getting several albums from that early or late 80s, early 90s period of Rush before they went on their hiatus in 1997. And this is a fan base that, is just not afraid to spend money on anything and everything Rush. So you have to think this set is going to sell pretty quickly once it comes out. We talk about these stories about every other week, and I think it's great that these bands are releasing, especially now that vinyl has, for whatever reason, made some sort of a comeback and has become kind of the collector's way of releasing something now. It's kind of cool to see a lot of these old albums make their way to vinyl or come back out on vinyl again after maybe being released all these years before.
Yeah, I'm still holding out hope for a giant cassette box set. I had a chance to purchase one of several giant cassette boom boxes at the gaming convention this weekend. I passed on it.
Missed opportunity.
Might have been a mistake, but I guess if we're just releasing this on vinyl, maybe I'm good.
If either one of the ones I saw today would have had an 8-track player in it, I think I would have totally been for that. Did not see that, as it turns out, but it wouldn't shock me. I mean, I talked about a few weeks ago how supposedly there are people out there saying cassettes are making a comeback, despite the fact that is the worst way to listen to music. It's just not good at all. But it's somebody out there has to be the one that has to be the nerdiest and have the collector that keeps going farther and farther back in technology.
It's just write me a pros and cons list where cassette comes out ahead of anything.
Probably not going to happen.
Like with vinyl, you get the larger size for the artwork. It looks really cool. And I guess to some people, there's a certain warmness in the sound that's generated from vinyl that you don't really get on digital. But that's it. And cassette doesn't really have that. It has that weird kind of tinny sound to it and like hissy sound. Like it just, I don't know what we're getting from a cassette tape.
And it deteriorates quicker than all those other ways. Like, that's the part I don't understand. Like, why would you buy this inferior sounding product that's also potentially going to break or tangle?
Get stuck in the player and you wind it out. Like, no.
Never taken a pencil to a cassette, then you're clearly too young for this podcast, probably. But
I just think it's older generations trying to convince younger generations to get into this so they can suffer like they did.
That could very well be, but thankfully, this is just LPs, and you'll be able to pick that up soon. I'm sure a lot of Rush fans already probably have it on pre-order, but always like to spotlight those box sets for any music fans out there that maybe missed out on the news. Kind of tangent to that story, it was kind of why I brought it up, because it was kind of related, obviously, is Alex Lifeson's involved in a new project. It's called Envy of None. They have a new song out called Not Dead Yet. First off the top, AI video, which is gross.
Weird video.
Not a fan of that. But it is great to see Alex Lifeson making music, and he's got several artists from different bands together to basically create this Envy of None project, and they have a new song out. I think it's great. I would love to see him and Geddy Lee continuing to do stuff. Clearly, they have a pretty strong feeling as to why they don't want to do that, which you have to respect. But at the same time, it is cool that he's still involved in music and creating some new music for kind of a new generation of music fans.
Yeah, I mean, the only wrong answer is them not creating music, whether it's together or separate. There's really nothing stopping these guys from giving their fan base more of them at this point, unless they're just not interested. But yeah, I guess this is the follow-up to the Envy of None self-titled debut back from 2022. I've not listened to it. I did watch the video for this thing. It's fine. It's not really my style, but no doubt everyone involved is certainly capable of performing their said duties.
And, of course, the full album for this one's going to come out in spring of 2025, so it'll show up on a playlist probably at some point, and we'll see if it ends up making the cut. Coming up in the springtime. But if you're interested in that, you can check that out on the link that I pasted into the chat. And Blabbermouth has some more information on that album. But or that song that will be on the forthcoming album. It's time to get to our new music, and that means it's time for a couple disclaimers. Just a reminder, check out our website, nerdcastempire.com. We have, as I mentioned, kind of a slow open to the Discord. I'll eventually get a link posted so people can join the Discord. That way we'll be able to kind of communicate everything in one central location. Looking forward to that. Of course, you can check out our store. You can check out previous episodes of the podcast, all that stuff at nerdcastempire.com. We're all over social media. We're on X, we're on Facebook, we're on Blue Sky, we're on TikTok. You can find us everywhere at the moment, so check us out. Of course, you can find us live at least twice a week, most of the time twice a week, at twitch.tv/nerdcastempire. That's where we are now, of course, unless you're catching us on the podcast network or on the YouTube VOD. If you can catch us live, usually 7 o'clock Eastern time. And again, as I mentioned in my social posts, we're an hour earlier to people outside of the United States. This time did not go back this weekend. We had lost our daylight saving time this week, so our time went back an hour. So you may be hearing this, if you're listening outside of the U.S., an hour earlier than normal. Coming up Thursday night, again, Anime Thursdays. We'll talk Torg. We'll talk about probably some OhioCon news, because that's kind of a running topic. And then we're going to get to some more, another video of Mike's with some anime opening themes. That'll be coming up on Thursday. Probably be 8:30 Eastern time. We'll let you know in the socials when that's going to happen. Next Sunday, we'll be back with another episode of Music Weekly. It's the music of October the 25th coming up next week. Looking forward to that coming up next Sunday. It's time to get to the music of October the 18th. A reminder that if you're listening on the podcast version of this, you will not get the music clips. It will only be live on Twitch, hopefully on the Twitch VOD as long as they get through, and of course on YouTube as well, assuming they get through over there. Each week, Mike puts together a list of all the new rock and metal releases that he can find across the rock and roll world, across the entire universe, I guess. And then he will pull videos from each of them. We go through them. We pick 2 bands each that we want to recommend that you pick up their new album. And then, of course, in the last segment of the show, we go into the vault where we talk about some classic albums that you'll want to check out. But we're going to get to the new stuff first. And again, October the 18th is the date. A lot of really good stuff this week. I thought even the stuff that we didn't pick, there was a lot to pick from this week. But we had to narrow it down, which is what we do. And we're going to start off with Mike. Mike, what's your first pick of your 2 picks this week?
Yeah, so my first pick is a band that I'm kind of disappointed I hadn't discovered up to this point. They're kind of a sound that I really enjoy, and kind of in a wheelhouse of Finnish bands between like Children of Bodom and Sonata Arctica. It's kind of somewhere in between that. This is the 9th full-length album from this Finnish band. According to Metal Archives and what I saw, their band name is Latin for sword bearing or sword bearer. The band name is Ensiferum, and the new album is Winter Storm.
Yeah, it's got an interesting band name. Always really cool when you use the Latin, and it is a really cool sounding band too.
Yeah, I was kind of blown away when I heard them. Band members for this band include Markus Toivonen on guitars, percussion, and clean vocals, Sami Hinka on bass and vocals, both clean, harsh, just kind of providing backing vocals, Petri Lindros on vocals, the harsh vocals, and guitars, Jani Parvianen on drums and percussion, and Pekka Monten on keyboards and clean vocals as well. So kind of my first big takeaway is that pretty much everyone in the band provides some amount of singing to the overall product, and I think that really gives them such a rich, huge sound. Definitely something I enjoy. I'm a big fan of anyone that can blend the clean and the harsh, and these guys do it really well. I tend to enjoy any Finnish metal band I run into, so I'm not really surprised that I've gotten into these guys. Just really cool, epic folk metal, kind of power, kind of death. It touches so many different subgenres, I think, and that's always something I enjoy. Standout tracks on this album include Long Cold Winter of Sorrow and Strife, Fatherland, The How, From Order to Chaos, and the song that I picked out to demo, the song Winter Storm Vigilantes.
So we're going to check that out. Again, this is Ensiferum off the album Winter Storm. Winter Storm Vigilantes. Let's check this out now.
In the dance of winter is fighting
Yeah, I mean, they've got a great sound. What can you say? I mean, it's another one of those sounds that is kind of quintessential to this podcast. You have a band, like you said, that can do all the different types of vocals, that you have multiple vocalists that do, kind of gives you a well-balanced sound that means all the songs don't always sound the same, which is also nice because that happens a lot when we listen to these bands. But yeah, I mean, great sound, aggressive, but not overly aggressive. It's just these guys are really good.
Yeah, they've been around since 1995, and sadly, I'm just now discovering them. But yeah, I just think ever since I started embracing a little more of the harsher vocals, like this band's been sitting out there, and I was not aware of them.
Yeah, and unfortunately or fortunately, I guess depending on how you look at it, it happens a lot on this podcast. We find these bands that have been doing this a long time, and unfortunately, they hadn't been put on our radar. But fortunately, because we've been doing this podcast, we can discover them and get into them now. So
yeah, I mean, I think in so many ways we've been kind of victims of whatever an algorithm has played for us, whether it be on Pandora or iHeartRadio or even something like a music choice channel that I listened to in the mid 2000s. Like it wasn't touching all of these bands, but man, I wish it had been.
For sure. But that's what our podcast is here for, is to give you some different things to check out, including Ensiferum. That is really good stuff from them. Looking forward to actually listening to that whole album. What I've heard of it is really, really good. As always, you have 2 picks each and every week. What do you have for pick number 2?
So yeah, for pick number 2, I have a Spanish speed / kind of classic metal band. It's their second full-length album. The band is called War Dogs, and the album is Only the Stars Are Left.
Yeah, this was really good, too. Again, there were just a lot of good bands to choose from this week. A lot of good albums, and what I've got to listen to of these guys, I really enjoyed these guys as well.
Yeah, definitely not as over the top as the previous band, but still kind of has that just classic metal bombast, which I always get into. This is their second album, like I mentioned, follow up to 2020's Offering Die by My Sword, which is a great album title too. The band consists of Manuel Molina on bass, Jose Adeguer on drums and keyboards, Eduardo Anton on lead guitar, and Alberto Rodriguez on vocals and rhythm guitar. Yeah, I mean, this is speed metal. It also has kind of a bit of a folksy, epic, classic metal feel to it. JP at metalrules.com kind of compared the band to a growing list of some of the more modern bands that have revived and carried the banner for classic real metal, as he puts it. Bands like Eternal Champion, Visigoth, and Greyhawk. He also mentioned, and when I pulled them up on the playlist, the first time their video popped up, it was just the song with the album artwork, and you can't really tell what they are from the album artwork. Part of you thinks, well, this must be some sort of power metal band, or maybe folk metal, or black metal. Like, it's so, like, just old looking and medieval looking, but you think this could go in so many directions. So I'm kind of glad that once I got into it, it was something I could really get into, which was more kind of a folksy classic metal album. Standout tracks here, we're talking The Prosecution, Riders of the Storm, Vendetta, Only the Stars Are Left, The Seventh Seal, and the track I picked, the last track on the album, which is just kind of came out of nowhere, but the title is called The Vengeance of Ryosuke Taiwara.
Yeah, this was not the track that I expected it to be. Like, I kind of thought, I don't know what I thought it was going to be, but it was definitely different. I
was definitely curious when I saw that title, and I looked up the name, and I couldn't figure out if this was actually a real historical figure or what. I want to believe it is.
Sure. Well, let's listen to a little bit of The Vengeance of Ryosuke Taiwara. The last track off of War Dogs is Only the Stars Are Left. Yeah, that is one interesting track that goes in a lot of different directions. As you heard there, at the end of the track. It's
slower, soulful kind of solo there.
Yeah, you feel like there is a little bit of a Spanish soul to this, like kind of classical Spanish music in addition to like rock music, which is definitely different. Also, I just wanted to point out the logo of this band looks like it was drawn on the back of a folder at some point. Like it is definitely something that somebody would have doodled while they were sitting in the back of a classroom. But
it
I
looks
like
it should be some sort of like pen and paper role playing game, like logo.
Yes.
Like something you'd find from Dungeons and Dragons from 1983.
And for the record, that's a compliment.
That's a great thing.
That's a great thing that you could draw that and keep it as your logo, and it's not some commercially produced. At least I hope it's not. I mean, if it is, that's fine too. Somebody clearly has some foresight.
But I think that's still a style you're looking to get.
Yeah.
Whether it's done by a commercial artist or a member of the band, I think there's an aesthetic there that you're seeking, and they definitely nailed it.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I mean, just there does feel to be a little bit of traditional Spanish, like classical music in there as well, along with your rock, and clearly some rock that feels, I don't want to say dated, but it definitely feels like coming from a time period. Like there's some early '80s rock in there, like.
It's a European band that isn't trying to go for more of that European power metal sound.
Yeah.
Like there's definitely more of a classic metal.
Yeah.
Even more maybe of a Western styled metal here, which it's cool. I like it.
Yeah, it was definitely different for sure, but really enjoyable. So check out War Dogs. Only the Stars Are Left. Really good release from those guys. That was a really interesting listen for sure. I've got 2 picks, as always, each and every week, so we'll get to pick number 1, and I did I held back this week. I only picked one band that was a Frontiers record label signee. There were 3 of them on the list, and they were all really good, and I certainly could have picked 2 of them, but I did stick with just one, and I also went with one that was a little more out there than some of the ones I've picked lately that kind of feel like straight AOR rock. Like this definitely is a little more on the progressive side. This is the band DGM with the album Endless. They're an Italian progressive metal band. Name stood for Diego Gianfranco and Maurizio, for Diego Reali, Maurizio Pariotti, and Gianfranco Tassella. None of those guys are in the band anymore. They were all the founders of the band, but they've all since moved on. But the band's still going strong. This is their 12th full-length album. It's definitely progressive. Only 8 tracks and 56 minutes. 3 of the tracks are longer than 7 minutes, including the 14-minute closing track of Endless Echoes. You just had to read this quote from the Frontiers website because I think this kind of sums up somehow. Actually, there's a couple of the other quotes on the other band. I take that back. This quote is, Endless is a conceptual album that chronicles one man's imaginative journey to understand the choices that shaped his life. Through vivid storytelling, the album explores the eternal question, how might life be different if I had taken another path? It sounds very progressive. Definitely somebody who's spent a lot of time in a dark room doing some serious thinking.
That's just everyday stuff.
It really, yeah, I guess it is. There's a lot of 70s influences in this album. You hear Styx, you hear Yes, you hear Kansas. There's some flutes, there's some violins, there's some saxophones in here. It's just really interesting. It's just a great listen. And again, something that's just a little bit different than the typical Frontiers band. Standout tracks include Promises, The Great Unknown, The Wake, and the song we're going to listen to here, The Final Call. So we'll check out a little bit of DGM and the album Endless. This is the 6th track off of that album. It is Final Call. Let's listen to that now. One other, the reason I picked this song out is because it reminded me of another band not a band, but a collaboration that I really enjoyed. This felt like an Alan Land song. I could have been on one of their albums. But again, it is definitely progressive. It is an album that takes some twists and turns. But I really loved it. It was a really easy listen. Sometimes the progressive albums get to be so over the top, but I think having so many different instruments kind of mixing in with the guitars kept it fresh through the whole 56 minutes, and it really kind of flew by. But something I really enjoyed for sure. Mike, your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I love the fact that, it's progressive, but when you get to the chorus, there's still that catchiness there where it's like, okay, we want you to enjoy this, even if maybe you're not as into the insane instrumentation that we're going to give you. But I also thought during the chorus, like, as great as that sounded, it kind of took your mind away from the melody that was playing underneath it, which was equally as cool. Like, there's just so much there. I can't wait to get further into this album.
Yeah, it's definitely it's an album that, we have some albums each week where it's like every song sounds the same, but it's still good. This is not one of those albums. Every song is completely different. But it's also really good, so definitely encourage you to check out DGM, my first pick of the week. My second pick, I couldn't stay away from AOR completely, but I did get away from Frontiers. I picked a band called Nationwide. The album is called Echoes. This is a melodic rock band from Sweden. This is their debut album, so we went with a band that had 12 albums, and now a band that's their first. It's just straight up AOR rock. If you like AOR, this is going to be up your alley. It was put together in 2023 by friends and songwriters Carl Berglund and Peter Ledden. They wanted to put together a band that would close the gap between classic AOR and modern rock and bring something new to the melodic rock scene. They teamed up with bass player Mikael Hagström and drummer Richard Holmgren, and then brought in singer Daniel Groth to close out the album. This was one of those quotes that I get what they were going for. I think it might have got lost in translation a little bit. It's Nationwide is all about the refuge that music means to all of us. That music has no national borders. It is nationwide. I understand, like, you can't say worldwide because that's not the name of your band. So I get what they were going for there, is that it's across nations, and so it's nationwide.
It's intercontinental.
Yes, basically. But I do like the idea of music being a refuge. I think that's something that we really strive for on this podcast. Is like, hey, let's try to Chris pointing out a whole insurance company. You know how many times looking this band up I struggled because I would find Nationwide Insurance, especially living in the state where Nationwide is based out of, makes that even harder. But for sure, it's they are very much on our side. They're on everybody's side, as it turns out. But I like the fact that music can be an escape from just day-to-day life sometimes, and I think that's what this album really feels like. It's a great listen front to back. Doesn't feel dated like some AOR rock can feel. Just really enjoyed this album. Standout tracks included Fade Away, Can't Get Over You, Without You, and The One, which is the track we are going to listen to today. So let us check out Nationwide with The One off the album Echoes. Let's check this out now. Yeah, I mean, as much as the first album I picked was very progressive, this one is just giving you AOR straight down the middle of the strike zone. But they do it really well. So I think when you can nail it like these guys did, I think it's just really cool. And it's just got a great, enjoyable sound to it. And again, doing that without making it sound dated like some AOR acts, I really enjoyed Nationwide. Mike, your thoughts?
Yeah, when you do it well, there's nothing wrong with it. It's that music is always going to be ear pleasing, and I think these guys definitely handled that. Kind of also about their record label, Pride and Joy. It's one that we've encountered before. At the very least, Boguslav Balsarek's Crylord is on that label. Crying Steel, who we've mentioned in the past. And I don't know if they still are, but they were, the band Danger Zone, who we featured a few weeks ago, too. So this is definitely another one of those labels that has a lot of music that would be on our radar as new albums come out.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm a sucker for a good AOR band, and this was a really good one. Since I was trying to steer away from Frontiers for my second pick, this was a really good pick as well. Nationwide Echoes, please check it out. Really good stuff. And check out all the playlist. I posted it in the chat. See if there's some picks of you. My eventual goal as we get this Discord more open is that Mike's going to put his list together at the beginning of every week, as he always does. And he's going to drop that list into our Discord channel, and we'll give basically everybody a chance to listen to the music, and then potentially open it up for like one song a week to be like a user's choice, where we'll put like a Google Doc in there, and you'll be able to vote on what your favorite song off Mike's playlist is each and every week, and we'll spotlight it here on the podcast. So it's a chance to kind of get our listeners involved and maybe spotlight some bands again that are a little bit outside what might be our taste in music, because there's a lot of rock music being played out there. We certainly like to spotlight as much as possible. That's our new music segment for this week. It's time to get to the vault, where Mike and I will bring you classic albums you'll want to check out. Mike's been going through the Wikipedia list of glam bands, and we are now up to the letter K.
That we are.
So what do we have this week for the letter K?
Yeah, so letter K, unlike the last couple letters, have had a decent amount of options. The one I went with, though, was one that I'd heard of the band before. I think maybe one or two of their songs I've heard on satellite radio in the past. It's the fourth studio album from a band from Ontario, Canada. They are a hard rock, heavy metal, and glam metal band. Their name is Killer Dwarfs, and the album is their 1990 release, Dirty Weapons.
And this is another one of your vault picks that is still currently active. They're still out there.
Always glad to see that.
Still got a Facebook page, because it's always cool when we can tag a vault band that's actually still going at it, which is wonderful.
And another album that I was pleasantly surprised about. It's really good. The band formed in 1981 in Oshawa, Ontario. They've been nominated for 2 Juno Awards over the years, once for their self-titled debut album, and once again for this album, Dirty Weapons, which actually lost out to Rush's Presto, oddly enough.
Weird.
Yeah, kind of interesting. At the time of Dirty Weapons' release, the band consisted of Russ Graham on vocals, Daryl Miller on drums, Mike Hall on guitar, and Ron Mayer on bass. Band is still around, like you mentioned, and as of 2018, they actually signed to David Ellefson's EMP label group. I'm not sure how up-to-date the listings on the Wikipedia page for Ellefson's record label is, but at some point, his record label included acts such as Autograph, Kick Tracy, Killer Dwarfs, Mark Slaughter, and Ron Keel.
Oh.
Which is kind of interesting, because definitely more of like a mainstream rock feel to his signees, as opposed to the music that you're used to from him, being obviously longtime once bassist and founding member of Megadeth.
Yeah, it's almost like he wanted to give a spotlight to the more mainstream bands, as opposed to...
Always had a feeling that he was more into that side of rock, too, and just kind of fell into Megadeth. But, yeah, I mean, that's... I mean, who wouldn't want to be in a position to have their own record label? That alone is really cool. From what I read, it sounds like Killer Dwarfs were somewhat prominent on Much Music in Canada and MTV Headbangers Ball here in the States, but kind of fizzled out in the early 90s, which a lot of bands with this sound, that was kind of their fate. They reunited in 2001, then went on hiatus again until 2013. According to Setlist FM, because I always like to check and see what these guys are up to, they did play a live show this past August in Alberta and had a few dates back in 2023. So you mentioned them having a Facebook. It looks like to some degree they're still touring in a limited capacity too. AllMusic gave this album a 3.5 stars, suggesting that the band has a Motley Crue meets Rat meets Poison sound.
What do you expect when this album was released?
Yeah, I mean, a band that came up in the 80s and kind of reached a pinnacle in 1990-ish time. That's certainly not surprising, and that's not a bad sound to go for. They said that the album has catchy material, but isn't the most original or earth-shattering. I just think once you've reached this point, so many of these bands, and maybe they didn't really get to enjoy the same level of success as kind of the forebearers, but they had the sound pretty much nailed. Like, they knew what that kind of hair metal arena rock sound was, and these guys are no different. They kill it on this album. Standout tracks include Dirty Weapons, Nothing Gets Nothing, All That We Dream, Doesn't Matter, Coming Through, and Want It Bad. Dirty Weapons and Doesn't Matter in particular are just tremendous songs, and even if you don't want to check out the whole album, I would definitely listen to those two.
Yeah, I need to get around to listening to this because I haven't had the chance to do that yet. But I'm always kind of interested in these bands that kind of hit in that era where, again, we're talking 1990, so we're right at the tail end of where these bands were successful before grunge is going to kind of come in and sweep a lot of them out of the spotlight. And the other thing, I know we mentioned it. We may not have mentioned it on the air, but it just cracks me up. And you talked about them signing to David Ellison's group. The fact they released a live album called No Guff. Because the quote, No Guff Chet, is a Wayne's World reference. Evidently, that must be a Canadian saying.
I guess that makes sense. I didn't really think about that.
I didn't think about it either. I'm now wondering if Mike Myers just like
that's something he just said. Yeah,
line, and here you have another Canadian band using it for their live album because it's not a phrase I ever grew up with.
No,
but now I think it must be a Canadian thing.
I hadn't thought about that, but that now makes total sense.
But yeah, I definitely want to check these guys out. Again, I think that's the cool thing about going through these quote-unquote glam bands. Not all of them are actually glam bands, but they all kind of got classified by Wikipedia that way. But there's a lot of really good tracks in there. And some of them, it seems like every time you pick these bands, there's one or two that's like, I've heard that one before somewhere.
Yeah, it jogs a memory that you just forgot you had.
Yeah, so I am definitely interested in checking this album out. But definitely check out Killer Dwarfs, Mike's vault pick for this week. This was one of those weeks where there really wasn't, as we're into 2002 on my vault picks, and just again to kind of go through the whole cycle. We started many, many, many weeks ago now, basically
thousands of years ago.
Yes, before the quickening.
For Sigourney Weaver.
We started with Chicago's Chicago Transit Authority album, 1969. And each year I've picked a classic album that kind of represents my music taste or was an album that was important to me. There really weren't any albums that I bought or anything like that from 2002. So I did pick one that kind of had some songs on there that I really liked, but I just want to go through a few others really quickly because there were a lot of albums that came out in 2002 that had songs on it that I liked, but maybe I didn't buy the whole album or listen to the whole album. So let's run down the list real quick. Of course, Mike putting Fozzy and Happenstance.
Want to beat Chris to it?
Yeah, sure. I'm sure that would happen. Vanessa Carlton's "Be Not Nobody" came out in 2002. Included obviously 1,000 Miles, which that song is so pervasive. Oh, yeah. Ordinary Day was kind of a secondary hit for her, but 1,000 Miles is still kind of a classic, especially for someone who likes piano and their pop rock. Commencement, the album from Dead Sea, came out in 2002 because, of course, it had The Key to Gramercy Park on it. But it also had a song that wasn't actually a single. She Likes Big Words. That was another really good track off of that album. But for some reason, that was not a single off of that album, which is kind of interesting. But they were all right. They did pretty well for themselves during that time period. A Love, Hate, Tragedy from Papa Roach, which included She Loves Me Not. Time and Time Again. Not maybe as big a hits as some of their earlier stuff, but still a decent album. Stone Sour, the debut album from Stone Sour, came out. Get Inside, Bother, Inhale. I really dug. I got into Stone Sour before I got into Slipknot. Kind of went that direction. I'm sure there are a lot of people that went the other way because Slipknot kind of hit, and then they did the Stone Sour project, if you will, but I really dug the Stone Sour stuff, and it was only kind of later on. Chris, we're going to get to that here in just a second. I think, in fact, or maybe I didn't include that one. I'll have to see. I might have closed that one out. In fact, it looks like I did. I was going to include Taproot's Welcome. But yeah, I definitely got into the Stone Sour stuff first. It wasn't until later that I really got into the Slipknot stuff, but definitely enjoyed that. Trapped, the major label debut for the American rock band Trapped, which included Headstrong, which takes me back to whatever NHL game was that had that song on there. I wonder if it even says in the Wikipedia article, maybe not. Does not say briefly, but
Video game soundtracks were pretty crazy around that era.
They were. We got some really good stuff off of that, but that came out that year. Songs for the Deaf, the third studio album from Queens of the Stone Age, which included No One Knows, Go With the Flow. Those guys were very solid, obviously. Audio Slave, the debut album from Audio Slave, came out in 2002. Again, those guys are solid. Some good stuff on there as well. By the Way from Red Hot Chili Peppers came out in 2002, which included By the Way, the Zephyr song, Can't Stop. Just more good stuff from them. The most interesting one, which is what I mentioned earlier, that we're going to mention Jeff Tate again. This is where it's going to come up. This is one I didn't even know existed, and I've been a big fan of Journey for a long time. Clearly not a big enough fan, though, because Journey had an EP. It was the only EP the band ever released. It came out in 2002. It was called Red 13, released November 26, 2002. It was during the Steve Algieri era of Journey. It's just a 4-track EP. It's really hard to find in digital form. There are physical copies you can buy, but the song Walking Away from the Edge was co-written by then Queensryche frontman Jeff Tate, despite Tate not getting a writing credit on it. It was originally recorded for the Arrival album, but was not used on that album. But I listened to a little bit of the intro, which is Intro Red 13 State of Grace. Starts out with this kind of long intro, and then it gets into State of Grace, and it sounds like a very classic Journey song. And if you listen to it, and like I said, I'd really like to get into listen to the whole album. The description of it is much less an AOR album and much more getting back to the roots of kind of being a rock band. Much less polished. So it's kind of fascinating that I didn't know this thing existed. But I definitely want to get a chance to maybe pick up a copy of it and listen to it.
I assume that's not named after the Final Fantasy VII character.
That is at the top of Wikipedia, that if you meant the Final Fantasy VII character.
Probably.
In this case, that was not what I was going for. But
okay.
But I could have gone from there to that.
We could talk about the Final Fantasy VII character.
You would definitely know more about that than I would, for sure. I probably know as much about the cat as I knew about this EP before I looked this up. So, but the album I ended up picking was One by One by the Foo Fighters. Again, there wasn't really any that one album that I was really important, but Foo Fighters was releasing the point where they were really releasing good album after good album at this point, and this was included All My Life, Times Like These, Low, Have It All. Really where they, again, just kind of continued to their climb towards superstardom. Won a couple of Grammys off of this album. All My Life won Best Hard Rock Performance, and One by One won for Best Rock Album. These guys were kind of in that moment where they were just really hitting their stride, and I think even by this point and this may be a controversial statement, I don't really care, but by this point they had surpassed what Nirvana had done as far as like music quality, and were on their way to kind of blowing that out of the water. And again, I'm not knocking Nirvana. I just think Foo Fighters' ceiling was always going to be higher for a lot of reasons, and this was them kind of continuing that ascent toward that high ceiling. Now, they've run into some issues, obviously, some of them tragic, some of them kind of self-inflicted issues, but still like one of the great American rock bands, and this was a really good release by those guys. So just quick thoughts on Foo Fighters, and we'll get to whatever I missed from 2002.
Yeah, I feel like they're a band that just always persisted. Even if you weren't paying attention to them, every now and then you'd hear a new song like, oh, they're still around. That's cool. This is kind of like that. Like, I don't know how much I was paying attention to them when I heard Times Like These or All My Life, but you kind of knew that enough people cared that they were going to keep releasing music. And, even at this point, having this 2002, their first album probably came out, in 92, 93, something to that effect?
Something like that.
Like, they still have really good music ahead of them at this point, which I think goes back to the comparison to Nirvana, is that ultimately Nirvana's body of work just there wasn't enough of it.
Yeah.
I mean, you could argue that Limp Bizkit's a better band.
Let's have that podcast.
Kurt Cobain might even do it through the powers of AI.
That's possible. We could probably make that happen, but kind of tasteless. But, I just, Foo Fighters, I mean, they were just, Dave Grohl as a front man was just kind of on a different level. And that's, again, not to disrespect Kurt Cobain. Like, I know there are people that absolutely love what he did and love what Nirvana did, but Dave Grohl's one of the best rock frontmen maybe ever. And, as far as being a lead singer and a guy to kind of represent music, I mean, you think about all the documentaries he was on and everything like that, the guy was just on a different level. And then you still have all that great musicianship behind him, too. It's, like you said, these guys were just getting to the point, like you said, maybe you weren't following every release, but you knew they're killing it because, every couple of years there's another group of tracks that makes its way onto radio and is everywhere. And this was kind of that next step. And they're going to do it again in 2005 when they come back with In Your Honor, which of course included Best of You. Was another one of their great tracks. But
I think Dave Grohl's never going to be the guy that's going to create the next paradigm in rock music, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like,
right.
He's never going to be the poster child of what's next in rock and roll, kind of like Kurt Cobain was, whether he wanted to be or not. He was the face of grunge music, and clearly that didn't seem like something he had interest in being. Meanwhile, Dave Grohl just seems like a dude that when you see him on stage, it's like he's happy to be there.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you ever felt that way about Kurt Cobain.
Yeah, I think, and maybe that's got a lot to do with it too. That's a good point. Is one kind of embraced the stardom, and the other maybe was put off by it a little bit.
Yeah.
And again, that was kind of the era for that in the early '90s, where there was the era of the pop star who didn't really want to be pop and rock star.
Grunge kind of killed the rock star.
Yeah, it was video killed the radio star and grunge killed the rock star.
Yeah.
But yeah, Foo Fighters album really good. Definitely check it out. Most people listen to our podcast probably have in some form or fashion, but I'm sure there's some things from 2002 that I did miss besides Taproot's Welcome and Fozzie's Happenstance, which have both been mentioned in the chat. What else is on the list?
There were a few decent, pretty good albums out there. Not the laundry list that I think I've had years ago, but some of the things I'm looking at are Bad Religions, The Process of Belief. Great album. Songs like Supersonic, Prove It, Broken, Kyoto Now, Sorrow. Another one kind of more in that modern rock of the time vibe is Unwritten Laws Elva. Had songs like Up All Night, Sound Siren, See in Red, Geronimo, Babylon. See in Red was a huge hit for them. Good song.
Yeah.
Going back to prog metal, we got Dream Theater's 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence.
Had that on my list at one point.
Oh, man, such a good album. The Glass Prison, which is like the first part of the 12-step suite, which is an amazing piece of music in and of itself. The actual 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence had kind of parts of, like, had parts of that entire song that were individual songs themselves, like War Inside My Head, Test That Stumped Them All, Solitary Shell, just Dream Theater being Dream Theater. We got to mention one emo band, Taking Back Sundays, Tell All Your Friends. Huge deal at that point in time. Songs like Cute Without the E, Cut from the Team, You're So Last Summer, and Great Romances of the 20th Century. And a track called Ghost Man on Third, which is a tremendous song title. It's right up there with some of the song titles that the band Brand New threw out there, but that one caught me like, that's great.
Oh my goodness.
Like that's the song title that someone who grew up in our era and eventually formed a band would come up with. And, this is 2002, so that's certainly entirely possible.
Yeah, for sure. Because they were kind of cringy until you got to that one, and then it's like, that's actually pretty great.
And that's the problem with so many of those kind of emo albums at that point in time, is some of the song titles are just both ridiculous and amazing. And that is certainly one of them. Dokken had an album that year, Long Way Home, which is kind of underrated. I think a lot of people think the post-success Dokken is kind of throwaway, but they had some good stuff. This album had songs like Sunless Days, Everybody Needs, You. There Was a Time, Heart Full of Soul, Yardbirds cover. It's just quality. Like, it's not under lock and key, but for 2002, it's good stuff. We have Angra's album Hunters and Prey. Angra's always good. Tracks like Bleeding Heart, Hunters and Prey, Eyes of Christ. Mentioned Fozzie's Happenstance. Kind of a mixed album of covers and original stuff. The original songs To Kill a Stranger and Happenstance are actually pretty decent. Like, they're worth listening to. And you got covers like Mob Rules, Big City Nights, LOVE, Love Machine. It's just, no matter how you feel about Jericho, like this is competent rock music. It's not bad at all.
As future Ring of Honor champion, Chris Jericho to you.
It's true. Up and coming wrestler extraordinaire. That kid's got a future.
Oh, my goodness.
Another band that was still putting out decent music in 2002, Def Leppard, with their album X. They have a sound that is never going to be bad. Like, just their vocal melodies or harmonies alone carry them a long way. And on this album, you have tracks like Now, Every Day, Gravity, Scar. Really cool in an era where people weren't listening to Def Leppard. It's still a good album. Finally, we got Symphony X's The Odyssey. If you like kind of neoclassical power metal, these guys are certainly for you. Michael Romeo and Russell Allen, both great guitarist and vocalist. Tracks like Inferno, Unleash the Fire, Accolade 2, King of Terrors. Really cool stuff. Yeah, 2002 wasn't all bad.
As much as I enjoy the Alan Land stuff, I feel like I need to go back and give a more thorough listen to Symphony X because I'm sure I will enjoy that just the same.
Yeah, Russell Allen's a great singer. And the guitarist, Romeo, he doesn't look like a dude that can shred, but man, he can shred.
That's the ultimate compliment when you look like a businessman or something and you just can lay it down.
Very unassuming, and he is just, man, phenomenal.
That's really great stuff from the year 2002. And again, we're going to continue this through 2010, and then we're going to jump to a different gimmick just because the other stuff will be a little new. We'll eventually get to it if we continue this podcast many years down the road. I'm sure we'll jump back to that as well. It's time to jump out of this week's podcast. It's been great once again talking all things music here on the Nerdcast Empire. A lot of great stuff this week. A lot of great new music, some great stuff from the vault, and of course our music news that kicks off the episode. Big thanks to Chris for holding down the chat tonight, and Chris has done a lot of work to get the Discord up and running, and we're going to see more people kind of dropping into the Discord over the days and weeks to come. We'll eventually post a link on our social media for people that want to join into the Discord. And like Chris mentioned in the chat, for any bands that happen to check out our podcast, feel free to reach out to one of us and we'll definitely get you into the Discord. So when you've got shows or albums or whatever you want to promote, you can pop it right in there. And we have a channel for promotion to let us know when you're going to be out there. And hopefully people go out and support the music. Again, coming up Thursday night, probably 8:30, we got another episode of Anime Thursdays. We'll be back again next Sunday night at 7 o'clock Eastern with another episode of Music Weekly with the music of October the 25th. Big thanks to Stove Lake Media for their continued support of our podcast. We'll be back again on Thursday with another edition of the Nerdcast Empire. And until then, for Mike and Chris and the entire crew, I'm Matt saying so long. Don't forget to join the Empire, the Nerdcast Empire.